It started with a scream, sharp, choked, desperate. A little boy on the edge of a busy sidewalk stood trembling, his small hands flapping in distress, unable to form the words that were fighting to be spoken. Cars honked angrily, passers-by walked around him, eyes avoiding, ears deaf to his silent plea. And then she appeared, ragged, unnoticed, wrapped in a threadbare coat and carrying everything she owned in a torn duffel bag. A homeless woman. A black woman with hollow eyes and cracked hands who should have been invisible. But to this boy, she was everything. Without a second thought, she knelt down beside him, not asking for words, just offering presence, comfort, patience. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know who was watching. Broken heart, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unseen heroes, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Rapple of Hope. Your support helps bring stories like this to light and gives a voice to the unheard. Broken heart. Her name was Mabel. 52 years old, with aching joints and a once golden voice that had long been quieted by hardship. She hadn't always been homeless. There was a time, 15 years ago, when her life was full of purpose, laughter, and music. She had taught elementary school in a small town in Georgia. She had a husband, a son, a house with chipping paint but blooming rose bushes. But when her son died in a tragic accident and her marriage crumbled under the weight of grief, Mabel lost herself. She tried to keep teaching, but the laughter of children reminded her too painfully of what she'd lost. Eventually, the bills piled up, and she slipped through the cracks, one eviction, one job denial, one night on the street at a time. Still, Mabel never let bitterness take root in her heart. She talked to strangers like they mattered. She sang quietly to herself when the nights got too cold. She gave away her last granola bar to a girl younger than her son would have been. She saw herself not as someone broken, but as someone trying. And on that gray afternoon in the city, when she saw the little boy frozen with panic, something stirred in her again. A muscle memory from her old life. The teacher. The mother. The nurturer. The boy's name was Charlie. 6 years old, with soft curls and a perpetual look of concentration that only deepened when he tried to speak. His words didn't come easily. Sometimes they didn't come at all. Diagnosed with childhood apraxia of speech, Charlie struggled to form sentences even though he understood everything around him. His father, a busy, towering man named Grant Whitmore, had done everything to help: therapy, private tutors, speech apps, but nothing seemed to stick. Grant was a billionaire tech mogul, used to solving problems with money, speed, and logic. But his son's silence baffled him. And though he loved Charlie with everything he had, he couldn't always be present. That afternoon, Grant had let Charlie walk a few paces ahead in the park outside their high-rise penthouse. One blink later, and the boy was lost in a stream of strangers. Grant panicked, scanning the crowd. His security team fanned out. And then he saw her, the woman in the torn coat, kneeling beside his son on the edge of a street, holding out her hand, whispering something softly he couldn't hear. Mabel didn't try to make Charlie speak. Instead, she gently tapped her fingers against the pavement, inviting him to mirror her. Tap, tap, tap. At first, he hesitated, confused. But then, slowly, his tiny hands copied hers. They drummed together like that for almost a minute. It was a game. It was music. And then, without force or pressure, Mabel started humming. A low, lullaby tune, familiar and warm, like the comfort of a bedtime story. Charlie's shoulders relaxed. His breath steadied. And then, with a monumental effort, he whispered something that made Mabel's heart stop. Mel. It wasn't perfect. But it was close enough to her name. Mabel felt a tear roll down her cheek. Not just because the boy had spoken. But because it had been years, since someone had said her name out loud. Grant stood frozen just yards away, unseen. The security team held back, unsure of who this woman was. But something in her posture, her tenderness, kept them from rushing in. Grant was not a man easily moved. But this moment cracked something open in him. He didn't approach immediately. Instead, he let the woman help his son to his feet. She offered him a piece of candy from her pocket, her last one, and watched him walk away, safely reunited with the guard. She turned to leave, unaware that anyone had been watching. For the next few days, Mabel continued her routine, picking recyclable bottles for change, helping tourists find directions, sleeping behind the old library with a blanket donated by a church lady. She didn't know her life had already changed. Grant tracked her down quietly. He could have had her arrested, questioned, removed from his son's path. But instead, he visited her one evening without security, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, just another stranger on the sidewalk. She didn't recognize him. She offered him half her sandwich anyway. He sat beside her. He didn't know how to begin. So he just said, "You helped my son." Mabel looked at him, eyes soft but wary. "He just needed someone to wait with him," she said. "Sometimes silence needs company, not fixing." Grant blinked. No one had ever put it that way before. They talked until the sun went down. About loss. About children. About how sometimes the strongest people are the ones with nothing left to prove. A few weeks later, Mabel was offered a job, quietly, anonymously, as a speech aide for a foundation that helped children with special needs. The salary wasn't huge, but it came with housing. A bed. Showers. Dignity. Grant never told her who arranged it. But Mabel had a feeling. She worked with Charlie twice a week. She never forced him to speak. She sang with him. She let him build towers out of blocks and knock them down. She let him be messy, imperfect, joyful. And slowly, he started to speak more. Not because someone demanded it, but because someone believed he could. One afternoon, Charlie brought her a drawing, a crooked heart with two stick figures inside. He pointed at one. "You," he said, clearly. "Mabel." She cried for the first time in years. That night, Grant met her in the park. He looked different. Less armor, more human. He said thank you, not just for helping Charlie, but for helping him understand what love looks like when it asks for nothing in return. By the end of the year, Mabel was living in a small apartment near the school where she worked. She still hummed when she walked. Still gave away her lunch to kids who forgot theirs. Still listened more than she spoke. But now, when people saw her, they saw more than rags. They saw the woman who had helped a silent boy find his voice.